Let me start by acknowledging a very important lady in the House, the most Honorable Denise Eldermeyer Shearer. Happy to see you. And I know that being here at this forum may stimulate certain memories. Certainly, you would have known Bustamante. And I will say to G2K next time that you really should have someone reflect on the memories of Sir Alexander Bustamante from a personal point of view. Today, when I was at the floral tribute for Sir Alexander, I said to Babs, it was just such a pity that I did not get to know this great man. I was only maybe 4 when he passed. So I did not get a chance to meet him. But you know, I feel as if I know him. I honestly do feel as if I know him. Ministers, senators, members of the diplomatic corps, thanks for joining us. And of course, all of you lovely people who are gathered here to pay your respect to the great Sir Alexander Bustamante, national hero, founder of the BITU, founder of the Jamaica Labour Party, and indeed, truly, the father of the nation. Bustamante came back to Jamaica. I believe it would have probably been in 1904, thereabout. After traveling the world, we're not quite sure where in the world he went. It is said that he may have visited Spain, Morocco, Cuba, and the United States, and I believe the Dominican Republic, and other places. When he returned to Jamaica, he was struck by the level of suffering, hardship in the country. Now, you have to transport yourself back into that period of time to appreciate the challenges that existed. Jamaica would not have been out of a slave economy for a very long time. 1834 would have been emancipation. 1838, they would have abandoned the apprenticeship system and gone into a full paid labor economy. But after the emancipation of slavery, the economy struggled under the new arrangements because the truth is the world had moved on from slavery. Some of you may have read the book by a very prominent West Indian, Capitalism and Slavery. And that really explained that the death of slavery, though had quite a bit to do with morality, it had, in my opinion, far more to do with economics. The British economy could not continue to support a plantation economy. And it worked out to be cheaper to pay off the plantation owners and transition them from a slave economy. Slavery was profitable for several hundred years. But as technology changed, England became a strong manufacturing hub, and the technologies that existed made the production of sugar via slave labor uneconomical. So the Jamaican economy never really adjusted to the Industrial Revolution. That was the reality. So when the newly freed slaves, former enslaved persons left the plantation, there wasn't really an economy for them. Many of them went into small farming, subsistence farming. Some became traders. Some had nothing to do. And it didn't make sense really to work on the plantation because the plantation just was not an engine of economic growth. And this situation existed for a very long time because though the colonies in Jamaica at that time had quite a bit of latitude in running its own affairs, it really did not do anything for the formerly enslaved population. Certainly not in education, which was promised at the abolition of slavery, at emancipation, certainly not in health. In fact, during that period of time, there was an outbreak of cholera and several other diseases which claimed up to 10% of the Jamaican population at the time. There were no social services. There was very little development of infrastructure, no housing. And this continued from the up to 1865 when there was the Morant Bay Rebellion. And the Morant Bay Rebellion really drew attention to the difficult situation in Jamaica. And as a result of that, the British government started to look at circumstances here, and they took over the running of the country, essentially. They took back much of the political power from the existing parliament that was here, the assembly, legislative assembly. And they decided to make some changes administratively to the country, including the establishment of the parishes, putting in some amount of social services, building certain critical infrastructure, particularly with the ports. And from then, there was some amelioration of the circumstances. I'm giving you an abridged version of the history, trying to move through very quickly. But the situation did not improve for the average person. So if you look at 100 years between 1834 and 1934, the situation really did not improve. So when Bustamante came back to Jamaica from his travels overseas, where he would have seen other countries doing well, it would have disturbed him to see the level of poverty, the level of poor infrastructure, the high levels of unemployment that existed. And that led to emerging agitation amongst workers. Now, you have to understand that when the agitation started, there was a sense amongst the Jamaican unemployed, those who are looking for a better condition. They were hoping that the British government would come to their rescue, would come and ameliorate the situation in Jamaica. And for good reason, because you United Kingdom went through similar situations with their population. And out of their struggle, a labor movement was formed. And so there was a kind of expectation that a similar thing would happen in Jamaica. But the resistance here of the colonial leaders at the time was such that it set up a very aggressive and indeed oppressive resistance to any amelioration of the labor circumstances. And that set the pace, the tone, the condition for persons like Bustamante and others to emerge. The resistance was never a militant one. It was never seeking to necessarily overthrow. The resistance was, we want a fair deal. So when Bustamante came on the scene, I think initially people were a little bit skeptical of him, primarily because of his color. Why would he be championing the rights of the poor working class? But he won the trust of the people because, you know, he went amongst them and he spoke for them. He spoke at many meetings that were kept, and he became, you know, one of the featured speakers. But he also wrote profusely, many letters, and it makes good reading for you to go and look in the archives at some of the letters that he wrote. They were quite well written, and he has a particular humor about him, wit rather, not humor, wit about his writing. It's quite sharp, and he did get many letters of the day. And he captured the attention of a wide cross-section of persons with his writings, and he took up many issues. And in a critical point of his leadership would have been when there was a march in Parade. And by this, there were several other marches, including in Westmoreland, where there was some loss of life. And so the colonial government became very nervous that the labor movement was evolving to a point where it could destabilize the country. And so this march that was planned for Parade could not be allowed to go on. And they gathered the police to confront the marchers, and it is reported, whether it is myth or reality, I think it is reality, that Bustamante went in front, bared his chest to the policeman that had given the orders for the troop behind him to click their heels and take aim. And Bustamante says, well, if you have to shoot, shoot me and leave my people. Of course, at that prospect, the police officer balked and didn't do that. And Bustamante then instructed his people to sing, God Save the King, and marched on. So it is reported. And of course, from that point on, and indeed long before, Bustamante was seen then as the champion of the people. He formed a union and then afterwards a political party. He formed a union because that was where he thought the greatest impact of improving the lives of the people could be. But then you would recognize that coming out of World War II, the idea of the British Empire changed. And the notion of independence took root. And so there were others who felt that they needed to prepare for independence by developing a political organization. And that was done with the PNP long before. And Buster, seeing the movement now evolving from not just the liberation of labor into now taking control of a state to create a country and an economy, decided to form a political organization, the Jamaica Labour Party. So for us, the party came out of the union movement. And so we are always grounded in ensuring that the working class, that the base of the society, that the economy is well supported and well developed. So for us, it's not about political power. For us, it's not so much, the command of, I'm going to choose my words carefully, because I don't want this to turn out to be too much of a political. But, for us, our consideration is always Jamaica. It's always what's best for the Jamaican people. It's always what is practical. It's never about power. It's never about political control and political dominance. The Jamaica Labour Party will always do what is best and in the best interest of the people of Jamaica. So you will never see the Jamaica Labour Party get drawn into philosophical and dogmatic distractions. No, the Jamaica Labour Party will never get drawn into ideologies and get detoured into the exploration of fantasy. No, the Jamaica Labour Party is grounded in always keeping our eyes in what matters for you. And what is it that mattered to the people during that period of time, especially in the 1930s? I'm pulling in a lot of things because I want to give you very quickly context so that the presentation makes sense. How many of you ever heard of the Great Depression? What year was the Great Depression? It was in the 1930s specifically. It lasted for about 10 years. So it started like about in the 1920s and ended up like about 1933, thereabout. You can correct me if I'm a few years off. And that had its roots coming out of certain economic policies, but certainly it had some roots in World War I as well. So can you imagine a country like Jamaica that didn't have an economy to start with, didn't have an economy that catered to its newly freed population, and then had to contend with a global depression where you just couldn't get food because you couldn't trade. There's no country didn't have any money. You're a colony, and the colonial powers didn't have any money to take care of the colony. So it was a really difficult time. Let's characterize that difficult time. What would be some of the things that would be a feature of that time? Clearly, unemployment. Unemployment would be extremely high. Housing. Housing would be probably non-existent. So imagine that you're doing subsistence farming. You probably would have been able to sell some of your produce to a middleman who would then export it. But given that there is a global depression, there is no market for that. And the little subsistence that you do, that you would trade to get, there's nobody with money to buy anything. Where would your prospects be? It couldn't be in the rural areas. You'd have to come into Kingston to see if you could get a work on one of the ships coming in. Whether it is to offload or load or to do some cleaning work or something. So you found that at that period of time, there was mass migration from rural areas coming into Kingston. But where were they going to live? So I'm just trying to give you a sense of the time, of how difficult those times were. So Bustamante coming in gave hope. And he was a voice, a powerful voice. And he sat down with the business class, with the colonial powers, and with the workers. Now, mind you, for the business class and the colonial powers, he was seen as somewhat a troublemaker. And he was arrested. I believe it was for sedition. He was arrested. And he spent a couple months in prison. And, he's a very, very jovial man. When asked about his arrest, he said, "Oh, I got a little time to rest." And of course, when he came back out of prison, and he was released because the colonial powers realized that having him in prison was creating a martyr. And his stocks had grown significantly. And that Bustamante was a reasonable man, and that Buster was never his intention to overturn and create chaos, but rather to build a national consensus. Fair work, fair pay. And that is a fundamental philosophy that has transcended from then till now. That even in the depths of hardship, even as times were so difficult, his views were never the views of Marxists or fascists or socialists or communists. His views essentially was that if you unleash the enterprise and energy of the common man in a free and meritocratic system, that produces the best opportunity for prosperity for all. That was his view. That was Bustamante's view. And that remains today the guiding philosophy of the Jamaica Labour Party. So we have always been a party that believes that by the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. And nobody should prevent you from eating bread if it is by the sweat of your brow. Yes. So he believed fundamentally that even if the endowments are unequal, meaning that you're not getting any inheritance from your parents historically. You didn't start off with land, you didn't start off with education, you didn't start off with inheritance or wealth. He believed that once you create a fair and equitable playing field and you allow labor to flourish, it will find its true equilibrium. And that means that though we are not a socialist party, we are also very much concerned with the things that will empower labor to be able to fulfill its true potential. So philosophically, we believe in the energy and enterprise of labor. We believe it's natural, it's in all of us. Every one of us in here has the potential. And we also believe in empowering you to realize that potential. And so in the 1948 manifesto of the Jamaica Labour Party, it was clear. He believed in free scholarship for all. That's how they used to call free education. Because that is one of the ways to empower labor. He believed in a fair wage. That's one of the ways to empower labor. But he also believed in supporting businesses, because that is the way in which you create employment. And indeed, the history will show that Bustamante was always pro-business and worked and supported the private sector. And indeed, you could very well say that this balanced approach of supporting labor, ensuring that we are active in delivering what matters for labor, housing, education, ensuring that there is employment, ensuring a good regulatory environment to protect workers' rights, and at the same time encouraging labor's competitiveness and efficiency, and encouraging business, entrepreneurialism, and enterprise, creates the environment in which we can create wealth. And then that wealth is shared fairly. And that is why from 1962 to 1972, Jamaica had the highest rate of growth than any other period in its independent history. We departed from that, from 72, and we wandered off into some dreamland. And the truth be told is that we have not recovered. We have not recovered. The view is that, yes, we have achieved some things out of that meandering. But the truth is that had we stayed the course, we would probably be, maybe not a Singapore, but, close to it. That's the reality. So Bustamante gave essentially a guide to the Jamaican people. Firstly, we must secure our independence. All right. So Bustamante is largely responsible for Jamaica going it alone, Jamaica becoming independent. Initially, he supported the Federation. The records show that in several parliamentary debates, he supported Federation. But then he grew increasingly disillusioned by Federation. And when the opportunities presented themselves for him to pull out of the Federation, he took the opportunities and he pulled out of the Federation. And today, Jamaica is an independent country, the first within the British West Indies to gain its independence, and then all the other countries followed suit. But for Bustamante, independence was never about or only political independence. Independence was about your economic independence, your ability to provide for yourself. So in a sense, it's about being self-sufficient and being self-reliant. That was Bustamante, and that has continued to influence the policies of the Jamaica Labour Party today. Because what are we about? And what have we spent the last 10 years doing? We have spent the last, from 2016 to now, trying to develop and secure Jamaica's economic independence. We have political independence. But what we don't have is our economic independence. And your political independence can't be secured if you are dependent on others for your bread. Your political independence cannot be secured if you are dependent on others for your basic survival. And what we have been doing as a government is to make sure that Jamaica can stand on its own 2 feet and face the challenges of the world so that we can maintain our political independence. And I can give you a lot of examples of that. So today, we have practically full employment at 3.5% unemployment. That's practically full employment. Understand the importance of that. Place that in the context of the 1930s. Place that in the context of 1865. Place that in the context of 1838. All of those years, we have never had an economy that provided employment for almost all our citizens. Today, we do. Now, I'm certain you're going to hear somebody say, oh, it's low-paying job. It's low, you know what is going to be said. But you have to start somewhere. And what you want to do is to keep that economic engine going so that you can keep everyone employed. And once you are employed, you earn an income. And a critical part of independence is being able to earn income. Now, another part of independence is being able to make a choice of how you spend that income. And you can spend that income by consuming everything today, or you can make a choice to sacrifice and save. You're not independent if you are borrowing to consume. You can only be independent when you are spending your own money that you earn. So I'm confident that if we keep the economy going, we keep Jamaicans earning income, Jamaican households are going to increase their savings. They're going to build wealth. And that wealth is going to become intergenerational. And that intergenerational wealth is going to elevate the society. It's not going to happen overnight, but you know that because of Bustamante's philosophical outlook, the Jamaica Labour Party continues that, and we will always, whenever the Jamaica Labour Party holds the political power, we will always use that to ensure that the economy delivers jobs, that gives you income for your household, that you can use it to create wealth. You can also be assured that the Jamaica Labour Party is going to be frugal. We're not going to spend more than we should. No, we're not going to spend more than we earn. So you can take pride that your political organization has cut the national debt, right, from somewhere in the region of 130%. When we read the budget, it will be somewhere in the region of about 68%. And what does that mean for you? What does that mean for you? What does this frugality mean for you? Because I'm sure there are persons who are saying, then why you pay down the debt? Why you not spend it on roads or spend it on water or spend it on, healthcare? And it is a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question. But remember what I said about being truly independent. Right? You can't be truly independent if you are borrowing and you are in debt. Because no matter if you decided to spend it on the immediate consumption that you need now, there's always something called interest, which you are obligated to pay when you borrow. And that interest sucks up a huge amount, if you have large debt, of what is called the fiscal space. So the fiscal space is essentially the revenues that you gain, you earn, whether it is through taxes or grants or you earn from fees. Fiscal space, that tells you what you can spend. You can increase that by borrowing some more. But note, each time you borrow, you are also decreasing the fiscal space because you are increasing what you pay out of that with the interest payments. Now, what Jamaica suffered from is that what we used to pay on interest out of that fiscal space was huge. Sometimes we were going up to 50% of that fiscal space in interest payments. Now, in 2015, 2014, 2015, interest accounted for 33% of that fiscal space. Today, it's just 18%. So people who argue, don't pay down the debt, just use a little space that you have, spend it on, whatever it is that you needed to spend on now. And if you need a little bit more, then borrow it. Those are the people who will never be able to sustainably improve quality of life. Because what will happen is that each year, your fiscal space gets smaller until it's nothing. So what we are doing is increasing our fiscal space so that we can sustainably spend on the things you want without worrying about debt coming back to eat up that fiscal space. So for Jamaica, every year going forward, once we make the commitment today, the sacrifice today to reduce the debt, every year after that, we have more space to spend on the things that matter to you. And that is what we've been doing. So for example, we have fiscal space. What we do with it? We bought 100 new buses. We're buying 100 new buses now. We're buying water trucks, garbage trucks. We're spending more on school. But not just that. If you see what we have done with the PATH program and increasing it year after year, we're able to give pensioners a little bit more last year. We give it back to you the first time ever. We give you a tax, reverse tax credit. So just think of all the things that we have done. But you put that into context that we have done it without borrowing. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we're paying down the debt and increasing the fiscal space. So can you imagine when we don't have any debt to worry about? And that would be relatively small, maybe 20% or less. If you were at that point, the target is to get to somewhere around 60, right? And then we can keep it stable at that and gradually reduce. But once you get to that point, your economy, your fiscal arrangements can be sustainable. And then you can set your long-term plans to deal with all the issues that we have. So I could stand here today and say, because of Bustamante's philosophy, if we follow it, if we stick to it, we can fix all the roads in Jamaica. And we could do it well within a decade. We could provide a social house to every single household that lives in the worst housing condition. We could repair and improve all our schools in Jamaica. It's quite possible. But you need to have this engine, which is the economy, that is running well to do it. But how does this fit within the politics? Because the demands that people have, so huge, so urgent. I want it today. I want the water today. I want my road today. And you can understand because some communities don't have water since they were formed, since they were free villages. So you can imagine the frustration. So the next challenge that we have as a country, building on Buster's philosophy and legacy, is not just to manage the fiscal resources, your taxes, and so forth. Well, we got to grow this economy. Because just getting more fiscal space by bringing down the debt is not going to be enough. And the politics will start to get very difficult as people say, I can't sacrifice anymore. I can't wait anymore. If you have to borrow, I'll agree with you, go and borrow. If you don't pay down the debt, I agree with you, I'll vote for that. And that is the pressure that is brought on governments why they depart from good fiscal management. No matter if I were to come back to the country and say to them, remember you went through that already when you had somebody who said run with it. Remember FinSac? So people say, I don't care, that was in the past, 20 years ago, I want it. No. And that's how the politics is. So we need to do one more thing in addition to managing the fiscal affairs very well, and that is we need to now pivot to growth. All right, so we have to grow the economy. Now that's a complicated thing, growth. Because, again, it involves labor. Something that we don't talk about a lot, and that is productivity. And all of you here are a part of the productivity question. I mean, you could start by asking yourself, are you doing and producing as much as you could do? That's a good place to start, a good question to ask yourself honestly. And then we can move from there to another step. What are some of the things that are inhibiting me, preventing me from being my most productive self? And then, of course, you get to the point of traffic on the road, poor health care, poor educational outcomes. So yes, government has quite a bit to do with productivity. So the strategy has to be to use this fiscal space to invest in the things that are going to empower labor to be more productive. And in today's world, and I don't want this to be confused, I'm not asking you to work harder. In today's world, productivity is about innovation and working smarter. I believe, I am confident that we have in Jamaica a higher proportion of creative genes than most populations. We just need to get them in schools into the AI labs. We need to get them, into the creative classes, hone those skills, and you would probably see some of the most fascinating animation told. We need to get them into engineering. We need to get them into software development. And so, within the pivot, as we celebrate the life and work of Sir Alexander Bustamante, within this pivot from just the fiscal management, we are going to be focusing on the empowerment of labor in a big way, because the growth of the country will come from the upskilling of our labor force. The Jamaica Labour Party will unleash the natural enterprise, entrepreneurship, and energy of the Jamaican labor force so that we can achieve the next chapter in the Jamaican story, the achievement of sustainable economic growth. So that is the struggle, that is the journey, that is the mission. And we thank our founding father, the Right Excellent Sir Alexander Bustamante, for giving us that vision, for giving us that outlook, and for developing the institutions that will help us to achieve this goal and this mission. You have been a wonderful audience. I hope you were able to follow me through the long and winding road, but I moved through it very quickly, I hope, trying to put everything into context so that you can understand what it is that the Jamaica Labour Party is about and what you are a part of, this great mission of building our economy for our economic independence, to protect our political independence as a people. God bless you and thank you.